At the world's fastest motorcycle race, one man moved the slowest. He didn't wear a team badge, didn't talk to anyone, and just stood beside a very expensive MotoGP motorcycle. The riders made fun of him. One even called security, and another young racer pushed him aside and laughed, saying, "Get this guy away from the bike." What they didn't know was that the man was Keanu Reeves. And when the lights went out and the bike specs showed up on the screen, his name appeared too. Watch till the end and ask yourself, would you have known who he was? The sun was really hot over the pit area at Circuit de Catalunya. The sound of engines roared like loud animals behind the thin walls of the garage. Mechanics shouted over the noise, and everything smelled like burnt rubber and excitement. It was qualifying day at MotoGP, and no one had time for anything else. But one man walked in like time was moving slower for him. He wore an old leather jacket that was faded at the elbows, jeans that had been worn a lot, and boots that looked like they had been on many roads. His helmet hung in one hand, and a backpack for motorcycles hung loosely over his shoulder. His sunglasses covered most of his face, but there was something about the way he stood. He seemed calm, like he didn't need to prove he belonged there. But in this busy place, his silence felt strange. A young racer named Zane Carter saw him from across the garage. Zane was new and full of confidence, wearing a fresh racing suit. He looked at the man and then said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Hey, who let the ghost in?" A few people laughed nervously. Keanu didn't say anything. He just stood by the bike, looking at it closely, like an artist looking at a sculpture he was about to finish. He wasn't touching it, just looking. Zane walked over with a smirk on his face and said, "Are you lost, old man?" He stepped into Keanu's space. "This isn't the fan area, that's 2 zones away, unless you're delivering food or oil." Keanu just looked at him calmly, not saying anything, which made Zane even more annoyed. "Do you even have permission to be here?" Zane asked, pointing to a crew member who stood behind him. "This guy thinks he's part of the team, but I don't even know who he is." The crew member opened his mouth to say something, but then closed it because he knew exactly who Keanu was. Keanu raised a hand to quietly tell the crew member to stay silent and turned back to the bike. Zane didn't like that and said, "Unbelievable." He turned back to his team and said, "Next thing you know, he'll try sitting on the bike." More uneasy chuckles followed. Keanu gave one last look at the bike, a sleek prototype with smooth curves and cutting-edge design, and gave it a small nod, almost like he was proud. Then he quietly stepped aside. The moment passed, but something unspoken hung in the air. Zane made a joke, but Keanu didn't laugh or react. And for some reason, that made the others feel uncomfortable. But Zane wasn't thinking about that. He was already checking his phone and getting ready for his next selfie. He didn't know it yet, but the man he just made fun of was the one who built the bike he would be racing on. By the end of the weekend, this fact would haunt him. In the garage, the noise of the mechanics working filled the air. The scent of petrol was strong, and fans spun to cool everything down. The bike, with its bold black and red design, looked like it was ready to take off at any moment. Keanu knelt beside the bike. He wasn't touching it, but his hand hovered over the rear suspension. He was looking closely, checking the angles and alignment. To anyone watching, it seemed like he was just curious, but to Keanu, it was important. It was like he was checking a heartbeat. Suddenly, a loud voice broke the silence. "Back away from the bike before someone gets hurt." Zane Carter walked toward him, still wearing his redline race suit, looking all shiny and confident, his phone in one hand, recording everything. He pointed the camera at Keanu. "Seriously, man, I don't know who told you this was okay," Zane said. "This isn't some fan area. This is MotoGP, this is redline. We don't let tourists hang around our bikes." Keanu stood up slowly, taller than Zane by a whole head, and older too, but he said nothing. He just looked at Zane quietly, not moving. Zane wasn't finished. He smirked and said, "Tell you what, maybe you should talk to someone before you stand so close to this expensive bike, unless you work here as the janitor." Then Zane picked up a paper towel and tossed it at Keanu's feet. "Here, you clean up the place," Zane mocked, making everyone laugh. The silence in the garage was now thick and awkward. The team's head engineer, a man named Theo, stood quietly in the back of the garage, watching with a serious face. Keanu bent down calmly, picked up the paper towel, and threw it in the trash without saying anything. Zane laughed. "You really like playing the quiet role, huh?" Keanu gave the bike one last look, nodded at the rear tire like he was respecting it, and then walked away. He passed Zane without looking at him. The head engineer, Theo, muttered loud enough for Zane to hear, "You have no idea what you just did." Zane turned, confused, and asked, "What?" But Theo didn't answer. Zane rolled his eyes and walked back toward the bike. Zane pulled out his phone again, ready to make a live stream. He raised the camera to his face and smiled, saying, "All right, people, welcome back to the pit live from Barcelona. You know it's your boy Zane, first MotoGP season, top rookie, and we're gonna get that podium." He then moved the camera around, showing his bike in the garage. But Zane wasn't done. "Wait, I have to show you something crazy," he said, turning the camera toward Keanu. Keanu was sitting quietly on a metal box against the wall, jacket still zipped, gloves in his lap, and sunglasses on. He didn't look at the camera, didn't even move. That made Zane press harder. This guy's been hanging around all morning with no badge, no team shirt, just sitting next to the bike like he owns it. Zane said with a laugh, "Is he a sponsor? I bet he thinks he's a racer." Keanu didn't respond. His fingers tapped lightly on his knee, calm and controlled. For a second, Zane felt uneasy, but he kept filming. "This is crazy. We've got million-dollar bikes here, and this guy just walks in like he's a part of it," Zane laughed. "Maybe he's the new pit coach." Keanu stood up, tall and calm, and walked past Zane without saying a word. Zane's camera shook slightly as Keanu walked by. Keanu passed through the door marked "Authorized Personnel Only" and disappeared. Zane scoffed and said to the camera, "There he goes, back to wherever they keep the coffee." He didn't know it, but the man he just mocked was the one who built the bike Zane would race on. He ended the stream with a wink, but behind him, one of the engineers quietly said that he had just walked into the restricted research and development area. Zane heard him, but didn't care. He had just embarrassed an old man in front of thousands of people, and he felt proud of it. What Zane didn't know was that he had just live-streamed himself making fun of the person who helped design his bike. The internet would never let him forget it. The prototype bike was ready in garage number 27. The room was still, almost like the calm before a thunderstorm. Mechanics moved around carefully, checking tools and making sure everything was in perfect condition. The bike sat in the middle of the garage, ready for testing. Zane Marino entered the room, full of confidence, with his helmet under one arm and his racing suit zipped halfway. The live stream from earlier was still getting a lot of attention, and he was smiling as he walked in. But then he stopped. The old man was sitting on the bike, looking calm. Keanu had his feet firmly on the ground, hands resting lightly on the handlebars. His eyes were hidden behind sunglasses, but he looked focused, as if he was imagining riding the bike. He didn't start the bike or even touch the controls. He was just sitting there, moving the bike slightly to check the feel of it. Zane was angry. He dropped his helmet and shouted, "What do you think you're doing?" The whole garage went quiet. One mechanic almost dropped his tablet. Keanu didn't say anything. Zane walked forward, pushing through his own crew and said, "Get off my bike." But Keanu stayed calm, his eyes fixed somewhere in the distance. Zane looked at the team and asked, "Are you all just going to stand there and let this happen? He could mess up everything with my bike." But nobody moved. Zane got even angrier and walked straight up to the bike. He grabbed Keanu's arm and said, "Office. Now." That's when Kalen, the lead engineer, stepped in. He quickly placed a hand between them and said, "Let go of him." Zane looked at Kalen and said, "What, you think he belongs on my bike?" Kalen didn't answer directly, but his stare said everything. Finally, Keanu swung his leg off the bike and stepped down. He adjusted the sleeve of his jacket, then turned to Kalen and said, "Steering head feels tight at mid-lean. Double-check preload when you reset rider settings." Zane blinked, confused. What? He's giving tech advice now? Keanu didn't answer him. He just picked up his bag and walked over to the table where his helmet was. Before leaving, he turned and quietly said, "You should spend less time talking to cameras and more time learning how your machine speaks." Then he left the room. It was silent for a moment. Zane laughed nervously, not understanding what had just happened. Who even is that guy? Some old rider turned test guy. But no one replied. The silence was different now. It wasn't awkward. It was full of respect, almost fear. Kalen didn't look at Zane. He just turned back to the bike and quietly said, "Get ready. You're 30. Zane felt a strange feeling in his stomach. He wasn't sure why, but he felt like he had just been put in his place, and he didn't even know how or why. The garage felt colder after Keanu left. Zane paced around the bike, feeling frustrated. "What's with everyone today?" he muttered. "Guy walks in like it's a coffee shop, sits on my bike, and nobody says anything?" Nobody answered. They all acted busy. Kalen was staring at his tablet. The assistant mechanic was studying the brake temperatures on the monitor. The intern was sweeping the floor that didn't need cleaning. Zane walked up to the intern. "You saw him just sit down on my bike, right?" he asked. The intern looked nervous and said, Yeah, but I mean he wasn't hurting it or anything." Zane rolled his eyes. "You people are crazy." He grabbed a rag and rubbed it across the tank of the bike. "He acts like he owns the place." From the other side of the garage, Kalen spoke quietly. "Maybe he does." Zane froze. "What? Who is he?" Kalen didn't look up from his tablet. "You don't need to know everything," he said softly. Zane was stunned for a moment, then scoffed. "What, you're defending him now? Some random guy just hops on my bike and starts lecturing me about listening to machines." Kalen didn't flinch. "He wasn't lecturing you," he said. Zane took a step closer. "Who is he, then? Tell me." Before Kalen could answer, the garage speakers crackled to life, announcing the final briefing in the press hall. Zane huffed and grabbed his helmet. "Whatever. Hope Mr. Mystery Man enjoys the view from the grandstands." But as he turned to leave, he saw the assistant mechanic pull something out of a drawer, a photo. It was old and worn, showing a press shot from a year ago. And standing next to the Redline prototype was the same man Zane had just mocked. Same jacket, same eyes, no sunglasses. Zane's heart skipped a beat. He walked away quickly, trying to hide his shock, but the silence followed him. It wasn't because the garage was awkward, it was because they all knew something he didn't. The truth was, the garage hadn't been silent out of awkwardness. It had been quiet because they all respected Keanu. Later, in the press hall, all the journalists and engineers filled the seats. Zane sat in the front row, trying to focus on his upcoming race, but his mind kept drifting back to the strange encounter earlier. The CEO of Redline Racing took the stage, smiling and polished. "Ladies and gentlemen," the CEO began, "what you're about to witness is the culmination of 2 years of hard work and bold experimentation." Zane wasn't paying attention. He just wanted to think about his race tomorrow. But then the CEO said something that made Zane sit up straight. "We are proud to announce that this prototype was developed in collaboration with Arch Motorcycles, co-founded by Jasper Harlow and our special guest today, Mr. Keanu Reeves. Zane frowned. Keanu Reeves? The actor? Then Zane saw him walking onto the stage, calm and serious, no helmet, no sunglasses, just his worn jacket and a quiet intensity. This was the same man Zane had mocked earlier. The room gasped. Some people whispered, "Is this a joke?" But no, it wasn't a joke. Keanu had a real badge on his jacket. He was a Redline Racing creative advisor, and he had a major stake in the company. The CEO smiled and continued, "While not the technical architect, Mr. Reeves played a key role in shaping the vision, rider ergonomics, and design ethos of this machine. This isn't just a bike. It's a statement." The room clapped politely. Zane just sat there, stunned. He had no idea who Keanu really was, and now he was starting to understand why everyone had been so quiet and respectful. Keanu wasn't just an actor. He was deeply involved in the world of motorcycles, and Zane had no clue. Zane didn't move. Keanu took the microphone for a brief moment. "I'm honored to be part of this. Arch has always been about precision, connection, and soul. We didn't just want to build a fast machine. We wanted to build something that spoke to the rider," he said. His voice was steady, humble, and grounded. Then, just for a brief second, his eyes flicked down toward Zane. There was no anger in his gaze, just awareness. It was as if Keanu remembered everything that had happened earlier. And in that instant, Zane felt small. No one else in the room knew what had happened before. They didn't know that Zane had mocked Keanu earlier in the day, treating him as if he were just some janitor or coffee delivery guy. But Keanu knew. And now, Zane knew too. And in that moment, Zane realized that Keanu was not just some nobody. He was the genius behind the machine that Zane would be racing tomorrow. Keanu had co-founded Arch Motorcycles, the company that designed the bike Zane would ride. And Zane had insulted him without even knowing who he truly was. Zane's chest felt tight. He couldn't breathe. The people around him were still clapping, still excited, but it all felt distant. The applause felt muffled, as if he were underwater. His fingers gripped his knee tightly. His whole body felt frozen, rigid with embarrassment. He could feel the weight of the room's attention, but not in a good way. Keanu had simply spoken with grace, and in doing so, had silenced an entire room without even needing to shout or raise his voice. The cameras kept flashing, but Zane couldn't hear them. All he could hear was the echo of his own voice from earlier, the mockery, the arrogance. As Keanu walked off the stage, Zane remained frozen. He couldn't take his eyes off the man who had built the very bike he was about to race on. The bike that had been shaped by the hands of someone he had ridiculed. Zane had always thought of himself as the star, the rookie with all the potential, but now he felt like a fool. The people around Zane started whispering. He could hear their excited murmurs. The engineers from his team exchanged knowing looks, their eyes flickering toward him with a mix of judgment and amusement. Even Theo, the quiet lead tech, had a small smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. It was as if he was saying, "Now you get it." Zane clenched his jaw. The truth had just hit him like a ton of bricks. Keanu wasn't just the guy from the press conference. He wasn't just an actor. He was the visionary behind the motorcycle Zane had been so excited to ride, and Zane had humiliated him live online. Later, Zane stood alone beside his bike, still in his racing suit, which was half unzipped with the sleeves tied around his waist. His helmet sat untouched on the bench beside him. He hadn't said a word since the press conference. He didn't have to. The whispers around him were louder than anything he could have said. They were talking about him, the rookie who had mocked Keanu Reeves. The same rookie who had laughed at the man who had co-founded the company that made his bike. Zane wished he could go back and take back everything he had said, but he knew he couldn't. The words were out there now, and they were out of his control. As he stood there, Lost in his thoughts, he heard footsteps approaching from behind. Zane didn't even need to turn around to know who it was. He could feel the calm presence of Keanu Reeves, the man who had built the machine that Zane was about to race. Keanu stopped a few feet away from him. No entourage. No cameras. Just the two of them, in the quiet, empty garage. Zane forced himself to look at Keanu. Keanu looked him over, not with disgust, not with anger, just with a quiet observation. Keanu's gaze was steady. It was clear that he wasn't judging Zane. He was simply looking, like a mechanic inspecting a part of the machine that needed attention. "You'll be fast tomorrow," Keanu said, his voice even and calm. "I watched your testing. You've got something." Zane blinked. "You watched?" he asked, surprised. Keanu nodded. "I always watch what I help build." He stepped a little closer, but his tone remained calm. "But here's the thing," Keanu continued. "Speed isn't the same as understanding." Zane was confused. "What do you mean?" "You can't hear a bike when you're too busy talking over it," Keanu explained. His voice was still steady, not harsh, just matter of fact. Zane swallowed hard, feeling his throat dry up. He wasn't sure how to respond. He had just insulted the man who had helped design the bike, and now Keanu was teaching him a lesson. A lesson in humility. "I didn't know who you were," Zane said quietly, almost as if trying to explain himself. Keanu shook his head gently. "That's not the point. You don't wait for a name to show respect. You offer it by default, to the crew, to the techs, to the guy sweeping the floor, to the machine." Zane looked away, ashamed. Keanu gave him space to think. Then, Keanu added, "You're talented, but talent without humility is like horsepower without brakes." With that, Keanu turned to leave, but just before walking away, he said one final thing. "Tomorrow, that bike is going to carry your name across the world. Just remember whose hand shaped it." Keanu walked away, his boots echoing on the cold concrete floor. Zane stood there, staring at the bike. The bike he had once guarded like a crown, but now it felt more like a borrowed crown, one he hadn't yet earned. The race came and went the next day, but it wasn't the lap times that people remembered. It was the video. A 42-second clip from Zane's own live stream began spreading like wildfire across racing forums and TikTok. In the video, Zane mocked Keanu, laughed at him, and belittled him. The punchline? Someone had stitched it to the footage from the press conference, showing Keanu walking on stage to thunderous applause. The man Zane had insulted wasn't just some nobody. He was the co-founder of Arch Motorcycles and the silent owner of the bike Zane was riding. By midday, the video had gone viral, with over 12 million views. Zane saw every single comment. But he didn't post anything. For once, he stayed silent. He didn't share a victory selfie. Later, long after the crowds had cleared and the paddock lights dimmed, Keanu returned to the garage. Theo was there, carefully wiping down the bike. "You didn't have to say anything," Theo told Keanu quietly, "but I'm glad you did." Keanu smiled slightly. Sometimes a lesson sticks better when no one shouts it. Keanu looked at the bike and said, "She's ready." Then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the garage. His presence had been quiet, unannounced, and unforgettable. The internet was still buzzing about the viral clip, but now it wasn't just about Keanu, it was about everyone we've ever judged too quickly. It was about those we dismiss without understanding their story. In the comments, one person wrote, "Next time you see someone who looks out of place, ask yourself, maybe they're not out of place. Maybe they helped build the place." And in that moment, Zane understood the lesson Keanu had taught him. Humility, respect, and understanding mattered more than anything else. If you liked this story, tell me in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more fun adventures and mysteries. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.